Our expropriation law at present is governed by a 1974 Act, which was obviously passed long before our Constitution. When the Constitution came into force, it created a different framework for expropriation, and it made specific reference to allowing expropriation to be used to deal with redressing wrongs of the past, assisting with land restitution and land redistribution. Since our Constitution, we have not had any new law to actually implement this new structure, this new framework. The ANC policy is clear that expropriation without compensation should only be one of the tools that is used for land redistribution and land restitution. And it is also their policy that expropriation without compensation should be done in a way that does not affect investment in our economy. It does not affect our economy in general. It doesn't affect other sectors of the economy, and it does not affect food security. I'm very thankful for the way in which this act has actually been drafted.
I think the most important parts that I find the most striking in any event is the fact that we have protection. Everybody's been concerned about expropriation without compensation, and that's going to happen in an arbitrary fashion. The government's going to simply step in and take people's properties away without paying them. Unfortunately, what we see in this bill is the exact opposite. What we do see is very much a concerted effort on government's part to ensure that the procedure is fair. They define how compensation is going to be determined. They look at the fair market value of the property. They allow everybody that has an interest to give an input. They allow everybody who is affected by this legislation, who feels that their rights have been affected, to take the matter to court. And ultimately what the bill says to us is that no decision to expropriate, and this is of course whether with or without compensation, may be made without the affected person's consent or without a court order. So that, I think, is the most important or positive light that this bill has for us at the moment. The other positive aspect of this proposed bill is the fact that mortgage bond holders are also recognised. In other words, if government is going to expropriate, they will have to take into account the interests of the banks. This has also been a big concern on everybody's minds in the past. What's going to happen to properties if they owe money on it? Well, obviously government will then have to settle those bonds. The Act also makes specific provision for settlement of any rates accounts that are owing on the property. What the section says to us is that under certain circumstances where it is just and equitable, government can consider expropriating by paying nil compensation, which obviously means without compensation. It does not say that this is going to be limited to any particular land, but what it does say is that all factors can be taken into account, and then they say including but not limited to, and then it continues to provide 5 categories of properties where it appears to me that government is going to only be focusing on these 5. And I say this with care, that's not necessarily going to be the case. The first one is where property is inhabited in terms of the Land Tenure Act. So here we're talking about farm labourers who maybe for 1 or 2 generations have been living on cottages on a farm, and where government could perhaps then shave off that piece of land, further subdivide it, provide title deeds to those labourers, and then they become owners of those smaller tracts of land. The moment you're in possession of a title deed, you become a landowner, which means you can now participate in the economy. You're going to at one point want to either bond that property or sell that property. So this could in fact stimulate more property transactions. So I think we have to also look at expropriation from a positive perspective. The other category of land is property which has been abandoned. Now, the only issue I have here is that they don't define the word abandoned. They don't tell us how exactly they intend to prove what property has been abandoned. But once again, we have to, I suppose, admit that if property has been abandoned by a landowner and they can prove that this owner has no further interest in the land, then why not expropriate without compensation? Because clearly it's of no commercial value to that particular landowner. The third category would then also be land which is owned by the state already. So we're talking about parastatal entities such as Eskom, Transnet, etc. The fourth category, which has then also been put aside, is property where government has already invested far more into the land than what it is actually currently worth. Where government, let's say for example, paid 5 million rand to the farmer for compensation, but then spent another 10 million rand on trying to boost the farming operation itself. So let's say for example, government has now spent 15 million rand on this farm, but it's only worth, let's say, 7 or 8 million rand in real terms, and where government feels that there's no reasonable prospect of the farming operation becoming profitable. And the final one, and I think this is the one which in my opinion does cause a little bit of concern, but also not for much reason, is where they're saying land which is held purely for speculative purposes. Now, unfortunately, they don't define what that means, purely speculative. Now, if we have to give it its ordinary meaning, that would simply mean property which somebody owns with the intention of making a quick profit. My concern here is that because they don't define it, they don't tell us how exactly they intend to determine on what basis have you bought the property. If we ask ourselves how many properties are really bought on a daily basis in South Africa or on an annual basis, which are bought purely for speculative purposes, I think everybody can agree we're talking about an absolute minority of transactions here that are involved. And I think that would still fall in line with the ANC's prerogative where they said we will look at expropriation without compensation as long as it doesn't hurt the economy. It also allows for the courts, if and when they have to decide on this particular issue, to exercise some discretion, which I think is a very good thing. If government does have 9,500 properties around the country which are standing vacant, it would first have to explain to the Constitutional Court why is it not using those properties to achieve its means, its goals. Why would they want to take away properties that belong to people to achieve these goals if it itself has all these properties lying around which are uninhabited?
It brings our law in line with the Constitution as it now stands, and it is possible that with legislation like this, we might be able to avoid the need for a constitutional amendment completely. If you listened to the State of the Nation address, you will have noted that there is still a Constitutional Review Committee that is working on proposals to amend the Constitution. There is also a high-level advisory panel, and their report is due back at the end of March. My feeling is that we are well on track to a resolution of this expropriation without compensation issue in a positive and responsible manner, which is going to protect other areas of the economy, which is going to promote food security and promote land tenure.